I was desperate, at the time I was 17, 18, unemployed, and I was desperate to get a break. And I knew that if I did get a try, I would grab the chance.
I think it was always going to be boxing. The minute I stepped into the gym as a 10 or 11 year old, boxing just took hold of my heart straight away. I love everything about the sport of boxing.
Hello, I'm Marie Crowe, and this is We Become Heroes, the RTE sport podcast that explores how elite athletes and sports people reach the top of their game and the lessons that they learned along the way. My guest today is Olympic silver medalist and former world champion, Sonia O'Sullivan. Sonia, thanks so much for coming on. I know you're in Australia, and I imagine it's very different to how it is in Ireland right now.
It is. It's really different. Like, we even had a bit of a mini fun run yesterday. It was kind of organised a bit impromptu, but for St. Patrick's Day. And there was about 100 Irish people turned up, which was amazing. So it was really good fun.
It must be great to actually be living a bit of normality, seeing a bit of sport, seeing some crowds and just not really feeling like we're still in a pandemic.
Yeah, it seems to have kind of, I suppose I was away last year when Melbourne was in lockdown, so I missed out all that. I was in Ireland. And then when I came back, it was a gradual reopening. But now it seems like things are pretty much back to normal. And tonight is the first AFL game in Melbourne, in nearly a year, I think. And there's crowds going into the stadium. So there's a lot of excitement about that. So I think people are really, starting to appreciate everything that probably a lot of people took for granted, up until last year.
Yeah, that's for sure. And then just in terms of training, Sonia, then, like, what are you doing? What are you doing at the moment, just like keeping fit and running wise?
Yeah, well, I'm lucky at the moment, actually, because I've managed to get myself to a point where I can run most days. And I follow a little bit of a training program, which is great because it just means that you can get up in the morning and you don't have to think about what you're going to do. There's a plan in place. I run probably 5 or 6 days a week and vary it up with the distance and the speed and, I was mainly just aiming to, keep myself reasonably fit and, run at a decent pace.
Does the discipline ever wane in any bit? Like, are you always kind of on track with what you want to do and what you want to achieve?
Yeah, I mean, I think, in a way, as you get older, I think you become more disciplined. Like, I probably would be much more disciplined now than I was as an athlete. And maybe because I have to be. If I'm not, it just goes out the window. But also, I think you kind of realize that you actually like that type of lifestyle and just having the structure and routine in your day. I think when I was training at a high level, I didn't realize how important it was. I just did it because it came naturally to me. And, I think that's probably one of the things looking back, if I'd known how important it was to maintain the, strict structure, routine, diligence, all the time, then, I think I maybe could have got a bit more out of myself. But everybody probably thinks that.
Do you think about that a lot?
Oh no, not at all. No. I think I suppose to be able to run at the level I do now and to maintain a level of fitness that I do now, it took me to kind of I suppose accept that things are different and to stop comparing and looking back at what I used to do. So, what I do now is, in many ways, it's unrelated to what I used to do. And you do have to detach yourself from that, I think. And, I tried to go and do some swimming and some cycling and, dabbled a little bit in triathlon. But, it always comes back to what you enjoy the most. And, it just happens to be what I was the best at. But I think when you, I suppose, realize that you actually enjoy it as well as being good at it, then that's when you can carry it forward, for, throughout your life.
Are you as competitive now as you always were when you were competing?
Not really, no. I mean, I do like to, I go to the track, which is kind of new for me. So for the past year, for the whole year, I would say I've gone and run on the track at least once every week. And mainly because I enjoy it and I like, the control that you have on the track and the pace judgment and things like that. And it took me a while to kind of realize that it's okay to do that, it's not only for fast runners, it's actually for everybody. And that's helped me then when I, coach and mentor other people to kind of share those thoughts with them. And, because people do tend to think, running on the track is, for people who run fast. But it's actually a really nice place to run. The surface is perfect and you can, measure exactly how far and how fast you're going.
I know if I saw you running on the track now here at home, I would actually stop what I was doing just to watch you. Do you get that in Australia?
Not really, no, not very much. No, it's quite different actually here. So you can, a few of the guys yesterday were asking me, if I, do I fly under the radar here? And I do a lot. I can definitely get away with a lot here. Mind you, I signed up to the gym there recently. I decided, I should get a bit more regular gym in my life because it's good for you. It's good, for your health and your fitness. When you're getting a bit older. And I turned up at the gym and this other lady is there and, the instructor went to introduce her to me and she goes, "Oh, you don't need to introduce her. I know exactly who she is." And I was like, "I'm just coming in here quietly now and you've blown my cover."
Everyone will be checking your times now and see what you're up to. So I have some questions that I want to ask you about your career, Sonia, and I'm going to just start with back when you were young, and what was your very earliest first memory of sport?
I think it was probably my dad, playing soccer. He was the goalkeeper for Cobh Ramblers. And so, my earliest memory is him going training. And, there were certain days that he went training and then obviously played the game on Sunday. And we would often go up and watch him and, stand behind the goals. And, for it probably wasn't advisable for young kids because there was plenty of words came out of his mouth that we probably shouldn't have been hearing. That was, I suppose, my first introduction to sport was seeing my dad take part in sport and, watching him, I suppose, get ready to go training and, coming back and cleaning his gear and his shoes after training and, just all those extra little bits that went with it that you kind of started to see that it's not just about playing, but being prepared as well and looking after, your gear and your shoes and stuff.
I love hearing stories like that because, sometimes when I interview people, I'll ask them, what kind of, you're going off training and you have family and you're making sacrifices. And this one footballer said to me once, he was like, but they're seeing me do that. They're seeing me get up off the couch in the evening, get my bag, go out and do my training. Isn't that a great message to send them that it's important to do that? And when you hear you say that, it just reminds me that, there are other sides to sport. It's not about just the sacrifice of what you're missing out. It's the example that you're setting as well. And the memories that you're making for your children. So just to you, Sonia, then, when did you first realize that you were talented?
I really don't think I ever thought about that. I don't think that word kind of was something I ever came across. So I think I realized that I enjoyed racing and then winning. And so then when I think about it now, I'm not sure, did I actually enjoy the running part of it or did I enjoy the winning part of it? I think it all evolves over time. And I suppose when talent kind of came into it, probably was when I started to train with other people and when I went to America to Villanova University. And if I had any setbacks, so if I got injured and had time out and then came back running, that I actually could get back into racing quite quickly. And I remember some of my teammates, would be thinking, but you haven't been running for all these weeks and now you can beat me? How is that? And, I didn't understand it at the time, but, eventually you do realize that you've got something a bit extra. And I think in running, all runners train hard to get to the high levels that they get to. But the talent shines through, I think, when you run a race and you kind of get yourself to another level that you never get to in training. So like I never trained at the level I raced at. So it was always a surprise to me when I went out and raced. And I always believed there was always this bonus time that I gained in the last lap. So you'd be going around at a certain pace and then you could run the last lap 10 seconds quicker. So you just got that bonus kind of, I suppose, the competitiveness that you get, you know, when the finish line is in sight.
And when you're in that situation and you know that famous kick that you have and that's about to come, are you thinking, can you enjoy that in the moment, or are you just so focused on the finish line?
It depends on the race, really. I mean, there's different levels of race. In some races, you would definitely, you know, you had a good handle on it, you know, early on. You'd have weighed up your competitors and you'd know where you stood in the field. And then I suppose as the stakes get higher, when you go to, you know, world championships and Olympics and European championships, then, you know, you do get a little bit nervous and you start to then have, you know, respect for the other athletes as well. And I think when you have that, then, you know that everybody's come prepared. So you have to be even more prepared. So, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things you just kind of adjust to it as you're going along and depending on the type of race. So, yeah, I mean, I think you have to be adaptable. And I think I was quite adaptable in the races. And, you know, a lot of it was about being patient and being calm as well. And, you know, not getting too panicked by stuff. And I think I was more able to manage and control that in myself when I knew I had all the work done and I wasn't missing anything. You know, if I hadn't missed any training or, you know, I'd had really good, solid preparation, then, you know, you're much more confident and the belief that you have in yourself just grows and increases as the time goes on. So
obviously athletics is your sport, but when you were like watching your dad playing football and like obviously there's lots of different sports available to youngsters in Cork, what was there anything else that you were into?
Not really, no. I mean, I tried, obviously in school, I, you know, was up for anything in PE and I was always, you know, that was my favorite class, you know, any excuse to go out there and to play games and to be competitive. And yeah, I mean, I think I used to get, you know, my friends used to say I was the, you know, the pet of the PE teacher because I would do anything he said. And I never had any like fears or anything at all. I was up for it. So I couldn't do any wrong there. But yeah, no, I tried basketball because I was pretty tall, but I wasn't very good. I just wasn't very coordinated at other sports. And, you know, I tried to play a little bit of camogie because it looked like fun when I was running around laps of the field and I could see the girls in school training together. I thought, oh, I'd like to try that. But again, I don't know. I think you're either an individual athlete or a team player. I think that we're very different depending which route that you go down. And I think I'm definitely a very individual and, you know, able to train hard myself. And even though sometimes you might get to the point where you wish you could have more people around you or share the hard work with others, you know, when things are going right and you're in a bit of a flow, then you're very happy to just be doing, you know, everything yourself.
And then when things aren't going right, you probably only have yourself to blame as well, which can be difficult, I'd say.
You want to lay the blame somewhere else then, or offload a bit of the pressure.
So what about heroes then, like sporting heroes when you were young?
So when I was really young, like Cobh was very much a soccer town. And so, you know, we were just, I suppose, watching the Cobh Ramblers. And then my dad was always a big Man United fan and I was a Liverpool fan. So, you know, I can remember having a poster of, you know, the Liverpool team on my wall and I knew every single player and all about them. You know, people like Kenny Dalglish and Graham Souness and, you know, all these people from the 80s. And so they must have been winning a lot back then that, you know, they were probably the most popular team out there. And it was a time when, you know, your school bag was a Premiership team bag. So I had my Liverpool bag, and you did all your writing and stuff all over it. So, you know, I think that was just probably a trend and a phase that I went through more than being a sport hero. But, you know, it was, I suppose I wasn't really, I was into music as well. So there would have been, I suppose I would have bit more into pop stars and stuff than sports stars. So yeah, I mean, it's a little bit different back then than now, I think, whereas now people, the heroes, are presented to them, and you can find out more about them and learn more about them and relate more to them. And particularly for girls' sport, I think there are so many different girls' sports out there now, and athletes who take part in so many different sports, that girls have the opportunity to look up to them and to, you know, choose what sports they'd like to try, and then maybe which ones they really like.
When I was young, and I know there was loads of people, Sonia, like we just had you. Like it was amazing. Like I think of the summer of '95, and Claire won the All-Ireland hurling, and then there was you. And like just talking about now and like the access and what you can see, like we just lived and breathed for you, which is, did you know at the time that was even going on?
Not really, no. I really didn't. And it's only looking back now, in many ways, I kind of wish I had known it, because then, you know, I suppose I would have seen then that there was more to just me going out and running and winning races, you know, that there was another area that, you know, I was useful for. It wasn't just all about the practicalities of winning or losing a race. But yeah, I mean, I suppose in a way I was lucky, and I suppose the people who looked up to me were lucky in that athletics was such a big sport in the 90s, and it was on TV a lot. And so it was pretty high profile, got a lot of coverage in the newspaper. And then, you know, they were the only mediums that people had. So everybody was looking and reading and watching the same things. So then they could all relate to it all. Whereas now everybody's looking at so many different things on so many different streams. And, you know, you can watch every obscure sport in the world live, but then you don't know who else is watching it. So it's not like you walk down the street and meet somebody who was watching the same thing as you last night. So I think that probably helped, you know, for me to have such a high profile, and for people to, you know, I suppose give me so much support, and, you know, be, you know, I suppose recall, you know, what I did back then.
Was there, like, you were the, you know, you were the poster girl for women's sport, you were the poster girl for sport for Ireland on the international stage. Was it difficult to be in that kind of, that fishbowl, that bubble, and have all that focus on you as a young woman?
I suppose there was always certain times when it would be difficult, but generally it was fine, because I traveled a lot and I was always away, you know, so I would place myself in places, like when I went to college in America, and then you were nearly invisible when I was over there. You know, you kind of had that kind of growing and developing stage for 4 years. But then around the time of the 92 Olympics, when I finished fourth, that was the last time that I actually came home to Ireland and had my summer in Ireland, where I was, you know, going up to the track in Cork to train, and, you know, running around the streets of Cobh. You know, after the Olympics, it all became about, you know, the convenience of travel from London. And so I based myself out of London, in southwest London, close to the parks where you could train over there, and with some other athletes as well. So it was kind of opening my eyes to a bigger world, and, you know, meeting up with people who were doing the same thing as me. And luckily for me at the time, a lot of those people were Irish, and people like Marcus O'Sullivan, Frank O'Mara, Paul Donovan. You know, we stayed in London together, we trained together, we traveled together. And so they were a huge support to me. And then it wasn't all about, you know, just going to races and running the race. There was a bit of an adventure, you know, around every trip that we did. That it was kind of exciting, and, you know, there was a lot of fun involved, as well as, I mean, I think, you know, running the races, winning the races probably helped that. And that it helped me, but it also helped them, to give, you know, such a positive energy to the group of Irish people who were traveling around Europe.
It sounds like you had a good balance of living your life and then excelling as well, and putting in the work that you needed to do to excel, which not everybody has.
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely, I mean, Frank was great because, you know, if we went to a new city, he wanted to show us, you know, there was more to the city than the track, the airport, and the hotel. So there was always a bit of an adventure, you know, the day after the race, or, you know, the night before the race, we would always go for a bit of a walk out down the streets and, you know, have a chat. And then you'd meet other athletes from different countries. And, you know, it was quite a social time, which I think, you know, is probably a lot different now as well, because, you know, athletes are so connected kind of digitally, I suppose, that, you know, it's quite different. I remember when I first went to these track meets, and, you know, you would go down to the dining hall in the hotel and you didn't know if there was going to be someone down there that you knew or not. And you kind of peek your head in the door and look around and hope there was someone there that you knew. And if there wasn't, you might go out and walk a lap and come back again. Because, you know, you just needed to have the comfort of knowing somebody when you walked into the room, because a lot of these rooms were, you know, full of the best athletes in the world. So it could be quite an intimidating place to go.
I'd say so. So Sonia, college, obviously, when you got there, was a big moment just in terms of recognizing that you had something. But was there a moment where you thought, okay, like, I am up there with the best in the world?
I think that moment was in Barcelona at the Olympics. So when I finished fourth in the Olympics in Barcelona, I think that was the first time that, you know, after that race, when I continued on and ran more races on the circuit, and I could look at a start sheet and then start to put myself in the top three and see that I could be competitive. So I definitely gained a lot of experience in that Olympics, but then also a lot of belief and confidence in myself. And then to be able to give them the opportunity to races and to come up against the girls who beat me in the Olympics and, you know, beat each one of them before the end of the season. You know, to be able to go into the winter with that knowledge that if I trained hard and came out, you know, that I would be competitive again the following year. And, you know, it was always about improving and getting better and, you know, just being able to, I suppose, see that fourth place in the Olympics as a positive, you know, as much as a disappointment of not getting an Olympic medal, but as a positive that, you know, I was kind of stepped up to the next level and belonged, you know, at the highest level of the sport.
Must have been a pretty amazing feeling. And then for things to push on and to go well. But like I've heard you say so many times, Sonia, you're an emotional athlete. And I think, like, because we were watching you so much, we almost kind of felt a lot of what you were going through as well. So there was highs and there were lows as well. And like all athletes have to overcome setbacks. For you, what was the biggest one in your career, do you think?
The biggest setback?
Yeah.
You think? So I think I had a few down through the years. I mean, I had quite a big setback when I was in college in America. So I had quite a few injuries there that I had to get through those and kind of come out the other side. And I think there was always a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. Every time I was injured, I was able to get myself back running again. And then it just took a while to, you know, I suppose not try and come back too quickly and to be patient, rather than always rushing back and, you know, wanting to be in the action. But yeah, I mean, I suppose there was kind of hurdles and obstacles along the way rather than setbacks. I think, you know, the obstacles and challenges that I faced, you know, they were difficulties, but they were never insurmountable. Like, I just had to work it out. I think the hardest part for me was that a lot of the time I had to work it out myself. And, you know, I spent a lot of time by myself in London, particularly in like around 96 and, you know, coming out of that in Atlanta. And, yeah, I never really got to talk to anybody properly about, how to manage, such a huge loss, and then to come out of that and to build yourself back up again. And it was really just, me wanting to, be better again myself. And I think maybe it went back to my one of my first coaches in Cobh, Sean Kennedy. I know, when I would have got injured when I was 17-year-old, I can always remember him, walking around the field with me, and he'd say, he said, a great athlete will always come back. You just have to give it time, and you have to build yourself up again slowly. And, I suppose if it was more modern times, then I would have been probably able to pick up the phone to him or send him an email or have that communication and say, remember when you said this, how can I, apply that to where I am now? And maybe I did that in my own head, but there's no doubt it took probably a lot longer than it should have. Because, we all know now that when you have issues and problems and, setbacks, that, the more you can talk about it and share it with people, then, the easier it is to deal with it and to push on and to, believe that, you'll get yourself back there eventually.
It sounds like a really hard time, Sonia, like just a really tough, sad, difficult period of time.
It was pretty tough. But, it was one of those things, I think in many ways, I didn't have anything else. So that was all I knew at that point. So I'd been, went to college in America in the end of 87 up on 91. And then, was on the world stage after the Olympics. And so it was all I really knew. And, I just had to make it successful. I had to get it back because it was all I wanted. So I think when you have that drive and that energy, that, you eventually will make it happen. And, as much as it would be nice to have had people to talk to regularly, and I did have people to talk to on occasion, but, often I was in London and the people I was closest to were in America. So people like Frank and Marcus, and, I would have talked closely to them in the summer months, but then in the winter, they all went back to their families. And I was still that kind of, I was in a bit isolated then because I didn't really have, that kind of winter support crew that people needed. So yeah, I just had to work things out, and I don't know how I did, but every now and then I think, you kind of, you flipped a switch and things started going the right way. And, the biggest thing for me after 96 was meeting Alan Storey, my coach in London. And, he just coached a group of, all sorts of runners. So there was very few Olympic athletes. There was a lot of people who worked all day and came training on a Tuesday night. And, I think I suppose training in a kind of a normal environment rather than a high performance environment, it made it more fun for me, and I enjoyed it. And, I was able to get a lot of good work done without really standing out. And that, I suppose, that's always been part of my life, is seeing the normalcy of everything rather than having to stand out and, expecting more, but just to be, I suppose, treated as normal and then to blend in with other people.
And I think probably as well, Sonia, everybody wanted more from you as well. Like there was, after 96, it was, you were still the peak of your career, and people wanted to see you doing what you do.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose there was nobody following behind me so closely to take over. So, yeah, and it was such a high level. And I think even when I did have, things didn't go quite so well, oftentimes they weren't that bad either. That there was, a great degree of hope to kind of put myself back together again. And there was, I suppose, a very positive feeling of support from, people in Ireland, even from the media in Ireland. I know Tom O'Riordan, I found this, he wrote me a letter in 1997. I think it was 96 or 97. I think it was 97. And, you know, it was kind of like, it was a letter written not as a media person, but as somebody who, you know, cared for and appreciated what I did. And, you know, was making suggestions of, you know, what training I might do. And, you know, just really trying to kind of, you know, check, you know, do I need to do something different here, or something I hadn't thought about? And, you know, I think when you get letters like that, and like I save things like that because you, I don't know, they mean something to you. I think when someone actually puts pen to paper and, you know, encourages you to, you know, keep going and don't give up yet.
Was there any doubt in your mind that you wouldn't get it back?
I don't think so, really. I think there was definitely a time where I just didn't enjoy going out for a run. The purpose of it all was missing. And so I think I always needed to have a goal and a target to aim for. And so when I did start back training in 96 with Alan, you know, we aimed for, there was a road race in Hawaii that I had been to the previous year. And we kind of said, okay, well, it's a nice trip, so, you know, we'll work towards that. And, you know, I think as the weeks went on, then I started to get fitter and I started to keep up and to run better in training. And these were all kind of immeasurable training sessions because they weren't on a track. A lot of them were on the roads around, you know, housing estates in London in the dark. And so I had nothing really to compare them to except for the people that were around me and, you know, how much more comfortable I was keeping up with different people each week. And, you know, just, I suppose when you start to feel like you're running better, then you do gain that bit of confidence in yourself again, and you get more positive energy and you start to enjoy what you're doing again. And I think at the end of the day, it all comes down to that is, you know, as hard as it is to, you know, work hard to be the best that you can be, you have to enjoy that work. And, you know, I think all athletes who compete at a high level, they work hard and they sacrifice a lot, but they're not really sacrifices if you actually enjoy doing it. And, you know, everything that you put in, you know, is leading to, you know, some challenge you're going to take and hopefully a reward that you're going to get.
When you look at your career and everybody that you've met along the way, who had the biggest impact on you?
I think the biggest impact, I mean, it wouldn't be one person. I think it would be coaches. The coaches in my life definitely had the greatest impact. And that started from Sean Kennedy, and, you know, before him, Pat O'Halloran. And it was always this kind of, they were always bringing you the love of the sport. And Sean was the first person who wrote me out a training program. And so it was like something for me to follow. And, you know, I did what I was told to do. So it was a bit like homework. And, you know, you had certain things to do on certain days. And, you know, then you would run a race and, improve all the time. I think the positive feedback that you get from your coach, but then also from the races that they pick out along the way to test you, just kind of lead you to have the belief in what you're doing, and then also in the person who's telling you what to do. And I think Sean, when he explained training a lot to me, and I probably didn't understand it all at the time, why I was doing certain things. But when I look back on it now, he gave me a deep understanding of, you know, the training I was doing and the reason I was doing it. And I carry that through, you know, training throughout my life. You know, it was definitely a phase I went through with Kim MacDonald where it was a bit more intense and the training was more testing, and it probably could have been a bit more balanced, but it definitely, you know, got me up to a higher level. And I think you can be really good as an athlete, but then you can plateau out and you need to work out how to get up to the next level. And Kim definitely got me up there, and it was all about, getting out of your comfort zone and pushing the barriers as much as you could in training, so that, then when it came to a race, there was nothing that you weren't prepared for. But, there's only so much of that you can take mentally and physically. And that's when I had to change. And, Alan was a much more kind of, just a bit more balanced coach. And it was more about kind of getting you fit and building up the endurance base, and then just using, I suppose that's when I did use my ability to be able to race, once I was fit.
When you think of what kind of the athlete that you were, Sonia, and the athlete that you wanted to be, and just the goals that you had in life, and look back over your performances and your big days or your favorite races, do you think there's one performance, or do you have one performance that just defines you as an athlete?
Yeah, that's a hard question, because I suppose every race has a story, and it has like the preparation that went in beforehand. But I suppose in even just looking at something like the World University Games in 1991, and I went there as a favourite to win the 3,000 meters, and I got beaten. It was like a road race. There were so many people in the race, and it was just a lot of pushing and shoving, and I don't know, it was one of those things, I just didn't quite get it right. And then came back a few days later for the 1,500 meters, and that was a much tighter and competitive race. So I think that really was a race that showed me that I wasn't just a distance runner, but I was also able to compete at the shorter distance, and able to match it stride for stride with people in a sprint race over 1,500 meters. So I think that was one that it gave me a taste of different levels of racing, and I suppose that was when I first got noticed by a lot of people, and that was the year before the Olympics in '92. So I suppose in a way that allowed me to be confident about just getting into the final in the Olympics, and that's the big thing about the Olympics is that you can't think about the end result until you actually get through the rounds and into the final, and then you kind of forget everything that's gone before and you start again.
Take every race as it comes is the cliche. I think that probably fits that one. Sonia, what about your greatest success? What is it?
Greatest success. I think in some ways it was probably just the longevity of being able to stay in the sport for as long as I did, even though I believe I could have stayed longer if I kind of didn't, I suppose, expect so much of myself and kind of was a bit more measured later in life. But I think the ability to go to 4 Olympics, and because a lot of the time just going to the Olympics is the hard part, and getting there and just putting in, it's like 4 years of training to get there. So I think, and then to finally get a medal, I think in Sydney, that was in many ways, that was, I suppose, tangibly the most successful thing that I did. But in many ways, it was even greater to win the World Championships, and then also to win the World Cross Country in 1998. So I think I would put the World Cross Country up there equal with any success I had, because it was such a comeback story for me to be able to do that when most people had doubted that I would ever get back to that high level again. And I think that gave me the confidence then for the Olympics in Sydney.
And when you think as well, Sonia, just about, I suppose there were uncontrollables really lining up on the start line beside people that there was questions about their authenticity. When you look back on that now and reflection and hindsight and all the rest, are you frustrated by some of the things that happened in races that you had no control over?
I don't actually think about it too much. I think, there's nothing I can do to change it. And even if I could, then what difference would it make? I think when you move on with your life and you kind of leave those things behind, and, the sport is changing and evolving so much now that, you can't even compare what I did to what people are running now, because it's just changed so much. People, they just train differently, they race differently. When I was racing, it was actually about racing, whereas now it's all about chasing times. It's a different sport until it comes to the championship racing, and that's the most exciting time. A lot of the time, you just switch off when it's time trial races, because they're not comparable to what was going on in the past, and it's hard to get your head around it, because I feel like people, they train at such a level now that they know exactly what they're going to do when they line up. So there's no surprises until you go to the championships. And, that's when the sport, you see the sport for what it truly is.
Do you think, Sonia, it will ever get back to what it was when you were racing, when John Tracy and Seb Coe and all those guys were on the track, and it was interrupting news bulletins and there were crowds and it was like such a glamorous thing?
I think it's too different now, because I think the way that people watch the sport is different. And so it can't go back to that if we want to have it accessible and to be able to watch it as much as we want to. And, I think this past indoor season was fantastic. There wasn't a whole lot of sport on, and people were craving, to watch live athletics. And we were able to do that, on our laptops, at whatever time we wanted to watch it. It was great. And wherever you were in the world, you could watch it. So I think the exposure of the sport is different. And, there's so many other sports out there that people are focused on that it's so easy to miss out on things. So, I think we just have to take what we can from the sport and appreciate, any results that we get, and the athletes that are out there competing, and, believe that they're all training hard and doing the best that they can. But yeah, there was definitely, I suppose there was more, athletics became more familiar this past, I suppose, what do you call it, winter, or earlier this year. Yeah, it's different. I think you can't really compare it. I think we have to move on and not try to compare it, because it's different now. And athletes promote themselves differently as well. And that's part of it. You have to be able to sell yourself as well, and to promote and share your story. There's not somebody out there going to be asking you the questions. I think athletes have to be able to tell their story alongside the achievements and success that they have. So, whenever they get the opportunity to do it, then they have to just go for it and, get the best exposure possible for their sport. And then, it's everybody's competing against each other on so many different levels.
It's pretty nice, though, to have experienced both, though, as in seeing what it was like in those days when there were athletics was one of the most popular sports and people were so interested in it and so interested in you. And then, like, we have the new era as well. When you look back, or when you maybe in years to come, Sonia, what do you think would be your legacy?
Well, I suppose, knowing what I know now and what I didn't know at the time, I suppose when I meet so many people on the street and, they still come up and shake my hand and thank me for, what I did for the sport and for, for women's sport and girls' sport in Ireland. I think to, have been there, I suppose, at the start of that, or, along the way as women's sport was becoming more and more popular and more accessible. I was a stepping stone along the way for girls to look up to. And, I think just to be a part of, the great Irish sporting history of women's sport is amazing. There's been so much, reflection in recent time with books and documentaries. And, I think when we appreciate what went before us so much more, like I didn't know that much about like Maeve Kyle and Mary Purcell and, you know, a lot of the athletes who paved the way for me. I never knew their story until recent times, you know, when they now get honored and awarded with Hall of Fame awards and, you know, just, I suppose, appreciated for what they did. That was so much harder back then. I really just looked at the record books and saw the times and names of athletes who went before me, but I didn't know their story. So I think to be able to learn that now and then to be able to share my story as well, and to continue that kind of evolvement of women in sport in Ireland and to see it grow and to see so many women out there of all levels running around the streets, you know, particularly the past year. It's been absolutely amazing that women have the confidence to go out there and to look after themselves by just being active.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And as well, just to have household names now in athletics, to like Ciara McGeehan and Nadia Power and Phil Healy, and just seeing them and being able to watch them on telly. And as you said, hear all the stories is really, really brilliant. So Sonia, what's next for you? When will we see you again?
Well, yeah, that's a big question, isn't it? I haven't even started looking at, you know, how you could possibly get back to Ireland anytime soon. But I hope, I mean, I would love to be able to make it back for this summer. And, you know, particularly with the Olympics coming on and the RTE coverage, that would be fantastic to be a part of that. You know, it's not the same for me to be anywhere else in the world, you know, watching Irish, you know, Olympic teams particularly take part and be supported, you know, on the national television. You know, there's just such a love for the sport in Ireland that, and I suppose because we are such a small country and we feel like we know the athletes who are representing us personally, you know, on so many different levels, that you don't get that same sense with athletes in Australia. You know, it's different here. It's not the same like closeness and I'm not sure how you describe it, but it's like as if the athletes that represent Ireland, they belong to the people and to, you know, their friends and neighbours and communities, and everybody wants to be involved in supporting them. And I think to be there to share those stories and, you know, to see the success of the athletes, you know, I hope that I'll be able to be a part of that this summer.
Yeah, hopefully, and hopefully it'll all go ahead, Sonia. That's I think what we're all looking forward to, having Olympic Games and having a summer of sport. So Sonia, thanks so much for sharing your journey with us. I have to say, you were a hero of mine growing up, and it was just brilliant to see you on the international stage, making us believe that we could all be whatever we wanted to be. I hope everyone enjoyed listening and watching. Please subscribe and leave a review.